America needs radical reconstruction. Join Bishop Franklin Reed III, Supervisor Marla Reed, and Kingdom Strategist to strengthen and encourage our country in the days ahead. Join Bishop Leah Daughtry, Dr. Jamal Bryant, Co-Pastor Susie Owens, Dr. Dennis Dickerson, Mr. Marcus Henderson, Elder Robin Ware, Dr. Darren Thompson, Reverend Tamika Reed Sims, Dr. Charles E. Goodman, and Bishop Franklin Reed III. Plan now for Radical Reconstruction, a virtual strategy meeting October 29th through October 31st. Live stream on all 30 Episcopal districts, social media, Facebook page, YouTube channel, and website. Connect your family and friends for this essential gathering and time of strengthening October 29th through the 31st. Plan now to attend Radical Reconstruction.
Praise the Lord, everybody. Protocol already having been established, I want you to focus with me on the theme, it's time to take a stand. In 1787, when Richard Allen and a group of African Methodists at St. George's Methodist Church took a knee, they were taking a stand. And when they finished praying, they walked out and started the African Methodist, what would become the African Methodist Episcopal Church. When Colin Kaepernick took a knee, he was taking a stand for the fact that Black Lives Matters. And today, we are asking you to take a stand with us. Take a stand for the fact that Black Lives Matter. Take a stand against white supremacy in its individual and institutional manifestations. Each of us to get involved in making sure that as many people as we know and our families and friends get out to vote. The African Methodist Episcopal Church has taken a stand. We're working as a denomination to make sure that 1.5 million people get out to vote. And if when you take that stand with us, you take a stand with our partners. So we're asking you to take a stand and go and discover the information in the AME Voter Toolkit. Go to blackchurchrocks.org and discover technology that will help you help others register to vote, get early voting, make sure they're registered to vote, and that they have voter information and voter education and voter inspiration. And so as I close our time together, I want to encourage you to take a stand on the promises of God. For God has promised us that no weapon formed against us shall prosper. And in the words of the hymn, when we stand on the promises of God, God will give us victory. Go stand with us as we stand with our partners and get out the vote, because the AME Church is taking a stand for the fact that Black Lives Matters and democracy shall survive for all people.
I'm not just a kid in your class, a test score grade. I'm an active mind, full of imagination and curiosity. Tap into my genius. I'm not just a knucklehead in your neighborhood. I'm an entertainer, maybe even a politician, building my own stage. Show me where the light is. I'm not just dance routines and memes, swipes and likes. I'm an architect of culture, a visionary of cool. Help me build this bridge. I'm not just a table shaker, troublemaker, rule breaker on your nerves. I'm the antidote to hopelessness, tomorrow's medicine, the cure. Can't you see? I'm a world and a world changer. At least I want to be. And I could be if you vote for me.
Vote for me. Vote for me. Vote for me!
I'm A.J. Richardson, Senior Bishop of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. It seems that in every election cycle, someone is sure to say how important the upcoming election is. The narrative goes something like this. This is the most critical election in a generation. Well, this time we really mean it. We can't stress strongly enough just how crucial this election is. Up and down the ballot, national, state, and local elections. Voting is not only our civic duty, it is also our duty of faith with concerns for the environment, affordable health care, education, the economy, for our nation's place in the world, and the myriad other existential public policy issues that affect our lives, the lives of our families, and the next generation. By all means, vote.
America needs radical reconstruction. Join Bishop Franklin Reed III, Supervisor Marla Reed, and Kingdom Strategist to strengthen and encourage our country in the days ahead. Join Bishop Leah Daughtry, Dr. Jamal Bryant, Co-Pastor Susie Owens, Dr. Dennis Dickerson, Mr. Marcus Henderson, Elder Robin Ware, Dr. Darren Thompson, Reverend Tamika Reed Sims, Dr. Charles E. Goodman, and Bishop Franklin Reed III. Plan now for radical reconstruction, a virtual strategy meeting October 29th through October 31st. Live stream on all 30 Episcopal districts, social media, Facebook page, YouTube channel, and website. Connect your family and friends for this essential gathering and time of strengthening October 29th through the 31st. Plan now to attend Radical Reconstruction. Hi, my name is Marla Reed, and I want to invite you, your family, your friends, your neighbors, neighborhood, community, and your churches to join me to get out the vote. We are facing one of the most historic elections of our lifetime, November 3rd, 2020. You see, your voice is important and your vote is important. Your vote is your voice and your voice is your vote. You see, America is in crisis right now, and all of us, each one of us, must step up and do our part to make sure that America heals. America has experienced an economic failure, health crisis, a pandemic, and then social injustice that has ignited the ugly flames of racism and violence and voter suppression. Listen. Each one of us now more than ever has to step up and do our part. And your part is to plan your vote and to cast your ballot on November the 3rd, 2020 or before with a ballot. I want to encourage you to use any one of these three organizations, and they are not competitors, but they are collaborators in getting out the vote. The Women's Missionary Society of the AME Church is pleased to be a partner with Mrs. Michelle Obama's When We All Vote. So you can go to whenweallvote.org and check on the integrity of your vote, or you can register to vote, and you can also be encouraged to register 10 other people to vote as well. Or you can use our AME toolkit, which you can find at amev-alert.org, and you'll find many tools to help you to get your vote to the ballot box. Or you can go to rocks.online. Rocks.online is powerful technology designed for faith-based organizations to galvanize and to mobilize the vote. And every vote matters. I want you to join me. Stay in touch with us, and we'll make sure that together we can all win and build a better America. Your vote is critical, and your vote matters. And as a matter of fact, we can only do this when we all vote. Thank you so very much for your participation and your cooperation. Get out the vote. Now, stand by for an important message from Mrs. Michelle Obama from When We All Vote.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for all that you're doing to help everyone in this country make their voices heard in this year's election and in every election. Your work has never been more important. From the ongoing pandemic to the passion and protests we've seen for racial and social justice, it's clear that we're in the middle of a big moment in this country. And that means we need leadership that honestly reflects who we are and what we stand for. Our job between now and November is to make sure everyone we know understands that the power to make change rests on our ability to cast a vote. Fair and safe voting is going to be more important than ever this year. And that's why When We All Vote is fighting to expand vote by mail, in-person early voting, and online voter registration. Now, I'm going to be honest. We're really going to need your help to make these efforts a success. Luckily, the first step is an easy one. Just spread the word. Make sure your friends, families, and communities are registered, know their rights, and are fully prepared to vote by mail this year or vote early in person. So, go to whenweallvote.org to find out more and get yourselves, your families, and your friends ready to make their voices heard. Let's get more folks across the country trained with the tools, the resources, and the information they'll need to vote, because this election couldn't be more important.
I'm not just a kid in your class, a test score, a grade. I'm an active mind, full of imagination and curiosity. Tap into my genius. I'm not just a knucklehead in your neighborhood. I'm an entertainer, maybe even a politician, building my own stage. Show me where the light is. I'm not just dance routines and memes, swipes and likes. I'm an architect of culture, a visionary of cool. Help me build this bridge. I'm not just a table shaker, troublemaker, rule breaker on your nerves. I'm the antidote to hopelessness, tomorrow's medicine, the cure. Can't you see? I'm a world and a world changer. At least I want to be. And I could be if you vote for me.
Vote for me. Vote for me. Vote for me!
Praise the Lord, everybody. Protocol already having been established, I want you to focus with me on the theme, it's time to take a stand. In 1787, when Richard Allen and a group of African Methodists at St. George's Methodist Church took a knee, they were taking a stand. And when they finished praying, they walked out and started the African Methodist, what would become the African Methodist Episcopal Church. When Colin Kaepernick took a knee, he was taking a stand for the fact that Black Lives Matters. And today, we are asking you to take a stand with us. Take a stand for the fact that Black Lives Matter. Take a stand against white supremacy in its individual and institutional manifestations. Each of us to get involved in making sure that as many people as we know in our families and friends get out to vote. The African Methodist Episcopal Church has taken a stand. We're working as a denomination to make sure that 1.5 million people get out to vote. And if when you take that stand with us, you take a stand with our partners. So we're asking you to take a stand and go and discover the information in the AME Voter Toolkit. Go to blackchurchrocks.org and discover technology that will help you help others register to vote, get early voting, make sure they're registered to vote, and that they have voter information and voter education and voter inspiration. And so as I close our time together, I want to encourage you to take a stand on the promises of God. For God has promised us that no weapon formed against us shall prosper. And in the words of the hymn, when we stand on the promises of God, God will give us victory. Go stand with us as we stand with our partners and get out the vote, because the AME Church is taking a stand for the fact that Black Lives Matters and democracy shall survive for all people.
America needs radical reconstruction. Join Bishop Franklin Reed III, Supervisor Marla Reed, and Kingdom Strategist to strengthen and encourage our country in the days ahead. Join Bishop Leah Daughtry, Dr. Jamal Bryant, Co-Pastor Susie Owens, Dr. Dennis Dickerson, Mr. Marcus Henderson, Elder Robin Ware, Dr. Darren Thompson, Reverend Tamika Reed Sims, Dr. Charles E. Goodman, and Bishop Franklin Reed III. Plan now for radical reconstruction, a virtual strategy meeting October 29th through October 31st. Live stream on all 30 Episcopal Districts social media, Facebook page, YouTube channel, and website. Connect your family and friends for this essential gathering and time of strengthening October 29th through the 31st. Plan now to attend Radical Reconstruction. Good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in to the afternoon edition of Radical Reconstruction. It's time for war, the 3rd Episcopal District Strategic Planning Meeting. Good afternoon. I pray that you've had a great day, and I want to encourage you that there's more to come, and I know that your day will just continue to get better. We're excited because you have intentionally decided to spend time with us and engage with us, and we want to say thank you for that. Coming up this afternoon is Dr. Dennis Dickerson, and he will be introduced by our own Dr. Fred Wright, but we want to take this opportunity to invite you to stay connected with us this evening. We want to welcome you back as Dr. Jamal Bryant preaches the opening worship service for our time together.
And before we call on Dr. Wright, what we'd like you to do is know that between this session and 7 o'clock tonight, Dr. Jamal Bryant, that our constituent groups in the 3rd District will be having their meetings, their planning meetings on Zoom. And they will be meeting right after this session for an hour, putting together their plans, beginning to put together their calendar so we can have everything out in 2021. Finally, when I was in high school, my father made it known that he thought I should go into the active ministry. I shared with him the last thing I wanted to be was a preacher. And as I continued to read and read the autobiography of Malcolm X, I began to think wrongly, but at that time think that the Black church was really Christianity in blackface, and I did not yet recognize the difference between Christianity and whiteianity. Mm. And one of the ways I got turned around in my senior year of high school was I read a book of AME history by George Singleton entitled The Romance of African Methodism. And that book introduced me to some of the great men and women who made contributions to our people, our nation, Africa, the Caribbean, who were ministers, pastors, bishops, lay people in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. When I went to college, I discovered the book Black Religion and Black Radicalism by Gayrod Wilmore. And there I discovered a number of AME names like Henry McNeil Turner, like Daniel Alexander Payne, and the list goes on.
Yes.
The person, Dr. Dennis C. Dickerson, PhD, that the Dr. Fred is going to introduce, has a new book out on AME history. I encourage each and every one of you, whether you are a member of the AME Church or not, or just a person interested in Black history. His book, The African Methodist Episcopal Church, A History, is invaluable, meticulously footnoted, well written, meticulously researched. It is a must read. Just the chapter on the AME Church and Garveyism a portion of a chapter is worth the price of the book itself. And so God bless you, God keep you. All of our constituent groups, you know you have a sheet that you will be expected to send to the office. Tonight, let everybody know Jamal Harrison Bryant is going to be with us. We're going to have a great worship experience. God bless you, God keep you. Dr. Frederick Wright.
Hello, everyone. I'm Frederick Wright, and I'm coming now to present today's next session speaker. As we come to participate in this next session, a fight to honor our past African Methodist Episcopal Church, we have invited the right person to present on this right time subject matter, and none other than Dr. Dennis C. Dickerson. Dr. Dickerson is very familiar with the 3rd Episcopal District. His spiritual roots began in the 3rd Episcopal District, more specifically the Old Pittsburgh Annual Conference. As a matter of fact, he was born in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, a member of Payne Chapel AME Church, Duquesne, Pennsylvania. Dr. Dickerson is the James M. Lawson Jr. Professor of History at Vanderbilt University, where he specializes in the history of the U.S. Civil Rights Movement, the African American religious history, and the social history of medicine and labor. He has received grants and fellowships from the American Philosophical Society, the National Endowment of the Humanities, and the Rockefeller Foundation, as well as the American Council of Learned Societies and the Louisville Institute. His first book, Out of the Crucible, Black Steel Workers in Western Pennsylvania, from 1875 to 1980, chronicles the failed century-long struggle of black steel laborers to attain occupational parity with their Caucasian counterparts. His book, Militant Mediator, Whitney M. Young Jr., analyzes the leadership of a key civil rights leader and was awarded the 1999 Distinguished Book from the National Conference of Black Political Scientists. Dr. Dickerson has authored several books and projects, but his most recent book is titled African Methodist Episcopal Church, A History, which examines over 2 centuries of an African American religious body and how its insurgent impulses reckon with powerful black subjugation. Dr. Dickerson served as the president of the American Society of Church History from 2004 to 2005 and is a member of the editorial board of Wesleyan Methodist Studies. Dr. Dickerson was ordained an itinerant minister in the African Methodist Episcopal Church and eventually served as a general officer as the historiographer of the AME Church from 1988 to 2000. Dr. Dickerson belongs to that coveted fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity, Inc. He's married to Miss Mary A.E. Dickerson and are the parents of 4 children and 4 grandchildren who are their pride and joy. Let's give one of the sons of the 3rd Episcopal District a hearty welcome. Dr. Dickerson will come now in his own special way to give his presentation on a fight to honor our past African Methodist Episcopal Church, my dear friend, Dr. Dennis C. Dickerson.
Thank you, Bishop Reed, for this opportunity to address the 3rd Episcopal District. This is my home district. I grew up in Payne Chapel AME Church in Duquesne. It is a church of my father and my paternal grandparents. When my dad married my mother in 1938, my mother left her home church of Park Place AME Church in Homestead and joined Payne Chapel, where she and my dad raised my 3 older brothers and me, and we were converted to Christianity at Payne Chapel Church And so I'm proud to be a part of the 3rd Episcopal District as far as my nativity, and very proud to be a son of Payne Chapel Church in Duquesne. I thank you also, Bishop Reed and the 3rd District, for this opportunity to talk about the book that I just wrote and which was published this year in 2020, The African Methodist Episcopal Church, A History. It is 600 pages of AME history from the beginning of our denomination to the present day. The themes that I will focus on are just a selected group of subjects that are covered in the book. Any study of the length that this book is will be inadequate in terms of the broad coverage and depth that's dealt with in the book. But let me highlight a few issues that I think are important for this presentation and for us to remember. First of all, the origins of African Methodism lay in the conversion of our founder, Richard Allen. For Richard Allen, salvation, sanctification, and perfectionism were a part of the salvific process on which he was focused. This salvific process brought personal renewal. And this personal renewal, this work of the Holy Spirit in bringing about personal renewal, was so profound and so pervasive that it spilled over into corresponding impulses to renew society. So personal holiness or scriptural holiness yielded social holiness. Personal renewal yielded societal renewal. And these tenets, these precepts, became a part of the institutional DNA of what would become African Methodism. Allen became an itinerant AME preacher and settled in St. George's Church. And in 1787, in November of that year, he and his followers were accosted and were told to pray elsewhere in the rear of the church. This was an act, this was a representation for Allen of not only racial discrimination, but on a deeper level, this was an example of the declension in spirituality, which he believed was becoming characteristic in Methodism. So Allen resolved to become an agent, to become a progenitor in the reinvention, the re-envisioning of Methodism in America. And from the establishment of Bethel Church in 1794 and to the latter denomination established in 1816, African Methodism became a re-envisioning of Methodism in America, where the gospel was intended for those who were high as well as for those who were low, those persons who were rich as well as those who were poor, for those persons who were black as well as those who were white, for those persons who were free, in addition to those who were slave. And so this institutional DNA in African Methodism, which aimed at personal renewal for the believer and societal renewal for the rest of God's creation, became part and parcel of the AME Church. This theme was picked up by the AMEs who were in Charleston, South Carolina, led by Morris Brown, along with one of his parishioners and one of his exhorters, Denmark Vesey, who believed that it was not just sufficient to preach the gospel to inveigh against sin, but it was also important to inveigh and try to upend and end slavery. When Allen himself was converted, he said that after he became convicted of his sin, he could not be a slave any longer. Both slavery and sin, both sin and slavery were anathema to anyone in Allen's view who was a Methodist and one who became an African Methodist. This produced an institutional tension in African Methodism. Daniel Payne articulated it the best. Daniel Payne, who had the opportunity to become an abolitionist, compared himself to his contemporary, Frederick Douglass. Payne decided to devote his energies to the institutional development of the AME Church, founding Wilberforce University, for example, to become an educational center, not only for African Methodists, but for African Americans in general. He said he could have chosen abolitionism, but developing the institution of African Methodism, which was itself a liberationist project, was where he wanted to devote his energies, in contrast to Frederick Douglass. Though Douglass had begun ministry in the AME Zion Church, he had previously been nurtured under the quiet teaching, as he recalled, of Bishop Edward Waters at Bethel AME Church in Baltimore. Payne commended Douglass in the vocational path that he chose, but he said that while Douglass sought Black liberation in the realm of abolitionism and equal rights advocacy, Payne chose to achieve Black liberation by the development of a self-sufficient, autonomous African-American denomination. The AME Church began as an Atlantic world project. Richard Allen and his other co-founders, Daniel Coker, for example, envisioned African Methodism as an aegis, as a protective institutional framework for Blacks in the Atlantic, not only those in what became the United States, but also for persons of color, persons who were enslaved, persons who were expatriates, persons who were fugitive slaves, not only in the United States, but also in the Caribbean and the rest of the Americas, in Africa, and even those who were resident in Europe. So the AME Church was an Atlantic world project. This is how this church began, not just as an institution that was singular to Blacks in the United States, but an institution that also reached into the rest of the Americas, into the Caribbean. In 1824, Richard Allen sent a missionary to Haiti, but also to West Africa and later Southern Africa. The AME Church was an Atlantic world project, and these tensions in terms of institutional development and social insurgency, while they were always locked in battle, vying for the attention and the energies of AME clergy and AME laity, the church itself was a liberationist project, a liberationist presence, and various ministers, various clergy tried to work out that tension. Should one devote himself or herself to institutional development, or should one devote himself or herself and their energies to social insurgency? Some were able to combine those two pathways. Some chose one over the other. They were always in tension, but in the end, they produced an institution that had a liberationist and emancipationist ethos and viewed itself, viewed the church, viewed their ministries, whether clergy or lay, as a liberationist Atlantic world project. And one could see this not only in the Civil War, where, for example, Reverend Alexander Wayman, later Bishop Wayman, who was elected a bishop in 1864, talked about seeing soldiers march out the old citadel of African Methodism, Bethel, Baltimore, to fight during the Civil War. The AME chaplains who served during the Civil War, Henry M. Turner and Garland White and William Hunter and David Stevens, as well as AME celebrating during the war and after the war the liberationist leadership of Toussaint Louverture in Haiti, and later Antonio Maceo, the leader of an insurrection, a black man who led insurrection against the Spanish in Cuba. After the Civil War, the AME Church really fulfilled itself institutionally as an Atlantic world institution. The church envisaged itself, viewed itself as a church for blacks in the Americas and in Africa. And during this period, in 1874, with the Women's Parent Missionary Society, in 1893 with the Women's Home and Foreign Missionary Society, AME women saw themselves mobilize resources, raise funds to support AMEs who were in Haiti, AMEs who were in Sierra Leone, and later AMEs who were in South Africa. The AME Sunday School Union, which started in 1884, viewed itself as a publishing arm to produce literature for children and for parishioners in the Atlantic world context. The AME Church was a denomination in the diaspora. When Henry M. Turner presided in Georgia between 1896 and 1908, not only had he been to South Africa to unite the AME Church with the Ethiopian Church of South Africa, but he also, out of his annual conferences in Georgia, sent ministers out from Georgia into Cuba, as well as into Mexico, to minister to African American Latinos in those South American and Caribbean contexts. The AME Church was a denomination for the Atlantic world with this liberationist DNA embedded in its denominational activities, in its denominational programs, and its denominational persona. During the World War I and 1920s period, there was a major demographic shift in Black populations. African Americans who had been in the agricultural South predominantly moved in the multiple thousands into the North, into urban and industrial areas of the Northeast and Midwest, and to some extent into the West. Africans, people of African descent, particularly in the Caribbean, moved during this same period into the United States, into urban areas, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, and other northern and Midwestern cities. And this produced a membership crisis for the AME Church, as churches in the South, for example, were depopulated of migrants, persons who were migrating out to go into the North. They found themselves in such cities as Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and Boston and Cleveland and Detroit, encountering AME churches that had been long established in these locales as being inhospitable and unsympathetic to the cultural idioms and the religious practices of these newly arrived Southern migrants. The exuberant worship that Southern migrants were accustomed to were not always greeted favorably and in a welcoming way by these rather liturgically oriented churches, AME churches in the North. And so many Southern migrants, many of them AMEs, had a much broader menu of religious choices available to them, and found some of the newer Pentecostal and spiritualist churches more receptive to their habits of religious exuberance and enthusiastic and ecstatic worship. So many AMEs were lost during this migration period. The AME churches were also very slow to absorb and to adopt some of the newer music in the religious realm. The urban blues that was pioneered by Thomas Andrew Dorsey, Many AME churches were resistant to using new media like records and the radio in order to put out the gospel message. So as a result, when one looks at the U.S. Census as a guide, as a template, and as a framework, one will see in 1916 AME church membership was 548,000. In 1926, notwithstanding the migration, AME membership was at 545,000. Essentially, during this 10-year period, during this decade, AME membership stayed pretty much the same. African Methodism did not grow substantively. In fact, there was a net loss in membership, which was reflective of the inhospitality, the inability to adjust to the shift of new migrants from the South into the North. The AME Church, nonetheless, was still exuberant about movements for African American liberation. There was a significant AME presence, for example, in the Garveyite movement. Some would argue that in many areas, the Garveyite movement would have been singularly unsuccessful had it not been for AME participation. In places like Bermuda, where R. Hilton Talbot, who was an AME preacher in Bermuda, was an energetic force and presence in the Garvey movement. In fact, one of the first meetings that Garvey had in the United States after founding the Universal Negro Improvement Association was at Bethel Church in Harlem. And there were any number of AME preachers who were supportive of Garveyite aims to redeem Africa, to make a stand against the colonial presence of Europeans in Africa, as well as in the Caribbean. During the Depression and during World War II, the AME Church was a institutional refuge for those persons who were hungry and homeless and without hope during that economic crisis. And one could find AME churches as a place, as a venue to get food and shelter, and as a place where New Deal programs were channeled to help mainly in urban areas and some in some southern areas through the Agricultural Adjustment Act during World War II. AME chaplains and AME soldiers and AME bishops who promoted the purchase of war bonds identified with the war effort against the Axis powers. During the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power movement, the AME Church was a presence, it was a voice. The Reverend Archibald Carey, the pastor of Quinn Chapel Church in Chicago, and an alderman on the City Council of Chicago, gave a fateful speech to the 1952 Republican National Convention, in which some of his phraseology revolved around freedom ringing from sundry mountains throughout the United States. This template was picked up by Martin Luther King Jr., who in a decade or so later, 11 years later, incorporated some of Carey's rhetoric into his famous I Have a Dream oration. Rosa Parks, an AME stewardess, played a large role in the Montgomery bus boycott. A. Philip Randolph, who pioneered the tenet and tactic of nonviolent direct action, identified closely with the Richard Allen legacy of his denomination, the AME Church, and rejoined the AME Church after years of inactivity, rejoined Bethel Church in Harlem during the 1950s, and closely aligned himself with that Allen and Henry Turner legacy of social insurgency. In 1960, at the 1960 General Conference, a Sumter, South Carolina pastor, the Reverend Frederick C. James, later Bishop James, elected in 1972, proposed that the AME Church should have a Department of Social Action. In fact, he argued that the department head should have the rank of a general officer, so as to, in an institutional way, identify the church with the burgeoning civil rights movement. During the Black Power movement, which places emphasis upon Black pride and anti-colonial insurgencies, there were a number of African American and Caribbean intellectuals of AME extraction who articulated through their various scholarly works, as well as in their ministries, the attitudes and the postures that stood against that stood with anti-colonial efforts. Samuel Allen, a prominent poet, was a pioneer in the negritude movement, an Afro-Francophone movement based in Paris, which talked about the composite Blackness identity of people of African descent. Samuel Allen was the son of Bishop A.J. Allen, and strongly identified with the AME heritage in shaping his attitude about the Pan-African identity of people of color in the Americas, in the Caribbean, in Africa. Out of this intellectual movement also emerged James Cone, the father of Black theology, and an AME of Arkansas heritage. Into the late 20th century and early 20th century, the AME Church, while it had always been an Atlantic world institution, came into a growing global consciousness, a consciousness of itself as a global institution. As the church moved into India and moved into Brazil, it identified, for example, with the fall of apartheid. In fact, the church, mainly through Bishop McKinley Young in the early 1890s, prepared voting manuals for South Africans to aid them in their transition to democracy. In the late 20th and early 20th century, the AME Church also made good on its feeble fledgling steps begun in the 19th century to bring full inclusion of women into the ministry of the church. Richard Allen had licensed Jarena Lee as the first female to be authorized to preach the gospel, though it took another century and a half before women would be brought into the ministry officially. At the General Conference of 1948, women were authorized to be ordained local deacons. In 1956, authorized to become local elders. But in 1960, mainly through the singular, persistent efforts of Martha Jane Keyes, a Kentucky pastor and evangelist, the AME Church authorized women for full ordination to the itinerancy. And immediately after that, in 1964, a New York City pastor, the Reverend Carrie T. Hooper, began a quest for the episcopacy. And though she was not elected, other women picked up the mantle and ran for the episcopacy until 2000, when Vashti Murphy McKenzie, a pastor in Baltimore, was elected to the episcopacy of the AME Church as the first female bishop. The AME Church is characterized as an Atlantic world institution with liberation embedded in its institutional DNA. There have been tensions in the church's history between vocations of institutional development itself, an act of Black liberation, and those who chose vocations in social insurgency. Sometimes those vocational and those vocational energies came into conflict. But the fact that they were in conflict testified to the liberationist thrust of this Atlantic world institution. For those who are interested, this is the book to which I referred, The African Methodist Episcopal Church, A History, published by Cambridge University Press. All of the themes to which I've referred in this presentation are contained in this book. Thank you, Bishop Reed. Thank you, 3rd Episcopal District.
Thank you, Dr. Dickerson. Again, here is the book. I recommend it to you highly. I've not been able to put it down. And again, whether you are a member of the AME Church, even if you belong to other churches or no church, African Methodism has affected every church, black or white, in America. It has affected, as Dr. Dickerson said, every major and positive move on behalf of our people. And so please get it, read it, encourage others to read it, text about it, a phenomenal book. And Dr. Dickerson, we appreciate your scholarship. We appreciate how clearly you not only write, but how clearly you lecture and give a wonderful presentation. It's time for us now at 4:33, from 4:33 to 5:33. From 4:33 to 5:33 p.m., we will have our component meetings on Zoom, and each component has set up its own meeting and will be sending it to us. You should have an outline by which you govern yourself. And then from 5:33 until 7 o'clock, we have a break. And so those of you who are not part of the 3rd District, enjoy this time, but you don't want to miss Dr. Jamal Harrison Bryant tonight at 7 o'clock, 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, 6 Central Time, 5 Mountain Time, and 4 Pacific Time. Please make sure you tune in, pass the word. Dr. Bryant is a tremendous preacher, pastor, activist in the Allen Wesleyan tradition. And so now enjoy your break. All of our components have a great meeting. Be detailed and precise as you put together your master plan for your AME component, because this year we're going into a radical reconstruction, which will encourage, equip, and empower God's people, God's community, God's nation, and God's world to turn the world right side up. Lord, have mercy. Have a great one. Enjoy your break.
America needs radical reconstruction. Join Bishop Franklin Reed III, Supervisor Marla Reed, and Kingdom Strategist to strengthen and encourage our country in the days ahead. Join Bishop Leah Daughtry, Dr. Jamal Bryant, Co-Pastor Susie Owens, Dr. Dennis Dickerson, Mr. Marcus Henderson, Elder Robin Ware, Dr. Darren Thompson, Reverend Tamika Reed Sims, Dr. Charles E. Goodman, and Bishop Franklin Reed III. Plan now for radical reconstruction, a virtual strategy meeting October 29th through October 31st. Live stream on all 30 Episcopal Districts social media, Facebook page, YouTube channel, and website. Connect your family and friends for this essential gathering and time of strengthening October 29th through the 31st. Plan now to attend Radical Reconstruction.